Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Long View, and welcome again to Charlie Sykes for our ongoing conversations about the Trump presidency and the state of the GOP. Charlie, welcome back, and thanks for
Thank you.
joining.
Happy Friday.
We spoke earlier this week on your podcast, and here we are, and as always, more things happen. And one of the things that's on my mind this week is really trying to think about, are there divisions opening up within the GOP or not? The major issue last week was the Epstein files and
Right.
tension with the MAGA coalition over President Trump. And this week, the Middle East has increasingly become a fault line with a few Republicans, at least, kind of expressing their opposition. So I guess let's just start. I mean, are these cracks in the Republican coalition, or are these more ephemeral or transitory points of tension in your mind?
Well, there's two kinds of splits. I mean, there is the cult, which demands absolute loyalty to Donald Trump, the person, but within that, there's always been a little bit of wiggle room that you can disagree on certain policy issues, and so you will see, people taking different positions. But ultimately, when it comes right down to it, do they serve Donald Trump? It's still pretty solid. Epstein, again, asterisk over it. But you look at some of the votes that have taken place this week that you and I have talked about, the confirmation of a guy named Joe Kent to be the counterterrorism director, despite all of his, really sordid connections with white supremacists and conspiracy theories. And Republicans went along with it. So to that extent, there are some splits. The split on the Mideast feels like a subset of something else that's going on, and maybe the biggest story of the week. I'm interested to get your take on all of this, which is you really get a sense that there is a pivot point in public opinion in general, and not just American public opinion, but global public opinion about Israel. And that many people, and I would include myself in that list, who have been strong supporters of Israel, are now stepping back and going, okay, what has Israel become? What is Israel doing? So you're seeing this, the split in the American people as a whole among Democrats. You had a majority of Democrats in the U.S. Senate vote to suspend arms sales to Israel, which is really quite an extraordinary moment. Gallup poll showing really a significant tectonic shift in public opinion, especially among young people. So yes, there is a split in the Republican Party. And if you're Benjamin Netanyahu, you ought to see this as very ominous.
I mean, the Netanyahu has invested a lot in an alliance, more of an alliance with the Republican Party than in the past, where prime ministers really had courted bipartisan
Right.
support. So if that cracks, if that breaks on him in any significant ways, it would really kind of weaken Israel's standing within U.S. Foreign policy and within Congress. I mean, that was always just a pure political risk
Right.
of the strategy undertaken.
Well, it was a risky strategy, and it was a misstep. Anytime you get involved in the hyper partisan politics of another country, you're betting everything on one political party, and this is again is I think one of the tragic missteps that we've seen from Bibi Netanyahu, who has squandered so much goodwill, but also is in the process of squandering what had been very, very solid bipartisan support for Israel, and he's gone full Trump. And so, his politics is now tied up with that. I think that a lot of supporters of Israel have tried to separate this, Israel, the democratic, symbol of courage and principle, from this particular government, but it's becoming much more difficult. And so, to the extent that he is completely identified with Donald Trump, I think he's weakened himself both in the short term and the long term.
And then one other issue now that's emerging as we're having this conversation is the tariffs are back. And a few days ago, you had many people kind of either praising President Trump or arguing grudgingly that the deals seemed to be coming together. But today there was more bad economic news, more signs we've now seen with prices, jobs, that this is having an effect. and he just unleashed
Yeah.
the rest of the tariffs. And I think there's turbulence in the markets. What kind of effect do you think all of this might have at this moment, given he's in a different place than he was
Yeah.
about a month ago?
Well, no, I mean, the chaos is just overwhelming. And just to your point, earlier this week, there was all that rush to say, well, maybe he's winning on all of this. It's going, which I thought was incredibly naive. It was incredibly credulous to believe many of the claims that he was making. A lot of the things he said about the deals that he struck were completely, imaginary. But just think in the last, 48, 72 hours, he had the taco moment with Mexico. Trump will always chicken out, backed off, backing off on some of the tariffs on China, and then today imposing these massive sort of like where do they come from tariffs that are going to have a tremendous effect on American consumers, and that's where we get to the economy. Um, he is in complete economic denial. The tariffs are taxes paid by Americans. He is in denial that they will be inflationary. It's one of the reasons why he's at odds with Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed. But we got kind of a reality check Friday morning when those jobs numbers came in way below expectations and actually worse than anyone expected because they also showed weak job growth earlier in the year. So these policies have consequences, and none of us can predict exactly what's going to happen, but the level of uncertainty and chaos can't be overstated. There's a great story by Bloomberg News. It's behind their paywall, but it basically talks about how they can't keep up with the software, just can't keep up with who are we taxing, who are we not taxing today, what is getting through. It is a cluster F for the ages, and business hates that. It's hard to make planning. It's hard to make hiring decisions. It's hard to make investment decisions. And that's what he's imposed on the economy right now.
And do you have a sense, we were talking about Capitol Hill, we talk about Bloomberg and other news organizations, but obviously with Trump, kind of MAGA social influencers, that
Yeah.
world of media is so important, reaching those voters who turned out in 2024
Right.
will be key. On all of this? I mean, pick your issue of the ones you've talked about. And we saw with Epstein, some of them seem to be breaking with the administration or
Right.
highly critical. Where are they right now? Kind of how does that universe stack up?
Well, I mean, you have and you're talking about the what I would call the MAGA adjacent
Yeah.
universe. I mean, the people who are Trump curious, not members of the cult, and I think they are showing some skepticism now. Of course, you have certain folks on the left who decided to distract everyone with the Sydney Sweeney story, which is like reminding people that there are woke liberals out there who we can beat up on, and understand how important this is in the right wing, the ecosystem, is to find a distraction, no matter how bad what Trump is doing is. Look, here's a crazy liberal. And of course, crazy liberals very often will, give them what they want. But having said that, the Epstein file the story is not going away. In fact, every time he opens his mouth, he seems to make it worse. And there's more and more evidence that they've covered up. I mean, there's the story about the FBI redacting Trump's name from the FBI files. That's going to be it's going to be interesting to see what the reaction to that is. Tulsi Gabbard is putting out information trying to distract everybody, about Obama. It turns out that maybe they're peddling Russian disinformation. So this is not getting better. Trump saying that he broke with Epstein because he was stealing his young 14-year-old masseuses from Mar-a-Lago. I mean, Julian, that didn't help. That did not put this to rest. And of course, the pardon of Ghislaine Maxwell, which I think has a huge potential to backfire. So again, it's you're having a lot of skepticism. You're seeing that showing up in the polls. I think the manosphere maybe have liked a lot of Trump's stuff, but they're upset. The brute squad, this tariff chaos, it's not working.
And this is where reputation matters, meaning I think there's this idea that with this presidency, his character doesn't matter.
Right.
That whatever he does is fine. But you can start to see, certainly with Epstein, the lack of trust that people have, even some of his own supporters at some level. They wave off, he says different things. They
Right.
still like him. But on this, it becomes problematic when dealing with something very specific, even within that MAGA universe, doesn't it?
It does, and there's something else that's going on that you and I have talked about, which is that look, Trump does see the world as a TV show. I mean, he is the executive producer of it, and we're in season 2 or season 3 of the Epstein files, and they're not going well for him. The South Park, I think it's possible to overblow, to blow out of proportion South Park going after him as aggressively, and yet it's an indication that maybe the vibe is shifting. And the one thing that Donald Trump hates, actually all authoritarians hate it, but Donald Trump especially hates it, is when he realizes people are laughing at him. And if when people start laughing at him, when he becomes a punchline because he is so ridiculous, um, it's a threat to him.
And when there's a threat to him, there is retribution, and that's, I mean, some presidents retreat when threatened or in crisis, some purely distract, but he seeks vengeance often, and he tries to stop it in aggressive ways we don't see with most presidencies. Kind of how far do you think he's willing to go right now? I mean, when you look at
Oh.
him and you've studied him, what are the risks?
I think they're tremendous, and I've gotten tired of using my phrase, a clown with a flamethrower still has a flamethrower. I mean, one level it feels clownish, and you're watching the show and everything, and yet realize how dangerous he is if he, if he is, in need of some sort of a distraction. Look, this is a man who has access to nuclear weapons, and with he's turned the Department of Justice into a personal cudgel of retribution, and he will go. We don't know. I mean, I, I I think you need to take him seriously and literally. I mean, the fact that he's already accusing Barack Obama of treason, and that some of the MAGA base and members of the U.S. Senate are saying, yes, we ought to have a criminal investigation of Barack Obama. I mean, really, even a month ago, were we thinking that was going to be the story? So we don't know. We're already at a position where we have active military troops in city streets. So when he threatens that he's going to basically invade sanctuary cities and fire the mayors and appoint military governors. Now I don't know whether that's just trolling or what, but the list of possibilities is pretty huge, and we should have learned that in the first 6 months, right?
Yeah. No, and now it's kind of the institutions. He One thing he has done well is, or successfully, not well, is weaken those institutions and weaken the firewalls that we have.
Yeah.
And so he has a lot more just in this president, part two,
Yeah.
he has a lot more kind of accessible, I think, to use. And he's already leveraged it against some institutions, but I think he has a taste of how far he can go.
Well, that's right. I mean, and with each institutional surrender, it emboldens him. I mean, why wouldn't he think that he could bully, Rupert Murdoch? Why wouldn't he? I mean, when you have all of these major universities and law firms and media companies, all kissing his ring, when he can ram through the most egregious appointees through the United States Senate, why wouldn't he think that he can do anything? I mean, the Supreme Court has said he's immune. He has unlimited pardon powers. I mean, the real, I mean, we are coming to the point where we've used the phrase the imperial presidency a lot before. Now we're getting a really, close, up close and personal look at what it looks like. And unfortunately, this imperial presidency could be Emperor Caligula,
Yeah, I mean,
so
the term is almost not good anymore. I mean,
you're right.
it doesn't capture where we are. That's kind of an old
Right.
model,
Yeah,
given the extremism of what
I
we're
agree.
seeing. Do you think there's anyone? I mean, is there anyone in the administration now who might behind the scenes try to do something, or is that simply lost? And if it's lost, what do you look for? I mean, who are you looking toward at this point for holding up that stop sign in a serious way?
Well, in the near term, the only institution that we can hope will be the federal courts. And, to say that that's a mixed record is putting it mildly. And but what is the Supreme Court going to do? And there was a moment when I thought perhaps the Supreme Court was having a little bit of buyer's remorse on immunity, and that they were putting limits, but I'm not that confident anymore in all of that. So we do have three branches of government. We know that the executive branch is completely beholden to Donald Trump. The legislative branch is completely unable to stand up to Donald Trump. So now we're left with the courts.
Why do you think this goes back to earlier, but with the Canadian tariff, Trump
Yeah.
at the last minute kind of lashed out because the Canadian Prime Minister said they would recognize a Palestinian state, and that he kind of took a stand. I mean, do you have a sense of what that was about and how serious he is? Because I can't tell exactly where he is at this moment on the issue in the Middle East.
Well, you and everyone else. I mean,
Yeah,
there is complete incoherence and there is chaos. I mean, that it's clear that Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump's mind is like has the attention of a mayfly. So he sees the images on television of starving children, and he thinks, I should care about all that. But this is the guy who just a couple of months ago was calling for ethnically cleansing Gaza and turning it into this Riviera on the Mediterranean. So part of him is, thinking, okay, my base has been strongly in favor of Israel, but now he's sensing those cracks.
right.
And the one thing about Donald Trump is he does not want to get too far away from his base. So I'm not saying that Marjorie Taylor Greene has a great constituency for that, but the reality is that Donald Trump is keeping his he's paying very very close attention to what talkers are saying, and so it is unpredictable. And this is going back to our previous point. So if Benjamin Netanyahu has pushed all of his chips on the support and the loyalty of Donald Trump, I mean, just saying it, you realize how what a dangerous and perhaps foolish miscalculation that was.
And do you have I don't know if you saw this, but the Smithsonian apparently removed two references to his impeachments in a display on the impeachment. And what's your reaction to that and thoughts on kind of
Oh,
what that's about?
well, that's the lead of my newsletter today.
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
we know he can't erase this history, but I mean, the fact that Donald Trump that they've gone so far as to try to erase history, the fact that he was the only president in American history who's been impeached twice. I mean, on the one level, this is you can blame Trump. On the other level, what were the people at the Smithsonian thinking? I mean, are we in an environment where one of the most prestigious museums in the country is going to actually, do this Stalinist whiting out of inconvenient history because of political pressure? I mean, and I mean, I'm, part of me thinks that they're going to be so embarrassed that they will back off. But this idea of warping history of trying to warp history into your own image as well as warping reality. I quote George Orwell and David French at the top of my newsletter today about that. And because Orwell understood the the 1984 aspect of rewriting history, of cleansing history. And it's almost cartoonish, except this is what Donald Trump does. He wants to rewrite the past. He wants to rewrite reality.
And again, when he does it with one institution, as you said earlier, it sends a signal to others. So, there was another story about a week and a half ago in the Times on the national parks and how the National Park Service has directives to remove kind of displays that don't accord with what the administration wants. So, this is a kind of broader effort for him to control narratives about himself and to control narratives about the country, which seems to me, as a historian, incredibly kind of dangerous and short-sighted. Presidents lose when they do this. I mean,
Well,
inevitably, people will write the history, and this will now become part of who he is,
right.
what he tries to do.
I see. I think that's kind of the key point is that he will fail to erase this from history. Now, of course, maybe they're thinking that we will have our own history, we'll have our alternative facts, we'll have our alternative history in which we can get away with all of this. But I keep turning the lens around on all of this. Okay, so Trump and his extremist, and by the way, I know it's overused, But wiping out history like this does feel totalitarian. This does feel fascist, and so I get that Stephen Miller and those folks want to impose some sort of ideological uniformity. It's the willingness of people to give up. I'm trying to imagine the historians at the Smithsonian, or the people who are in charge of preserving our legacy in the Parks Department, just going along going, okay, yeah, we'll do that. We're gonna erase all pictures of Barack Obama, or we're gonna no. Here's a black person here who's being commemorated, and we're gonna take down all those plaques. Where's the pushback on all of that? This doesn't seem to be. I understand there's personal risk, but if civil society in this country said, "You've got to be kidding. This is ridiculous. This is America. We just don't do this sort of thing." I think, well, I'm
No,
I'm
I
surprised it happened.
agree. I agree, and the Smithsonian is not some remote institution. It's not
No.
a university where you have it, which I value. But this is for lots of people come in Washington. This is really often your first cut or only kind of serious moment to look at history with your kids. And it's just incredible to me that they would say, okay, let's remove that from a I mean, there's not that many impeachments in American presidential history. So if you remove two, you're removing a big part of that.
Yeah, no kidding. And by the way, can I just mention the fact that he wants to apparently he's really determined to turn this into the Gilded Age and to gild the White House with as much, tacky
Mhm.
gold as possible. The I guess maybe this look, I don't give advice to Democrats, but if you cannot find a way to make a contrast between Donald Trump, the guy who wants the $200 million gold dining room, at the same time you're cutting the social safety net. If you cannot make this case, then you really ought to get out of politics. So I mean, it's and it will be so ugly. It will be so vulgar. I'm going to do a podcast with Tom Nichols later today, and I want to ask him what is it about authoritarians and autocrats that always have such bad taste, that always feel they have to go for the gaudy, this sort of the Slovenian whorehouse look, for the White House. I mean, what is that about? So I don't know actually.
Well, I look forward to hearing what he has to say if he has an answer. Again, everyone, thank you for joining. I hope you'll consider becoming a subscriber to our Substacks. We are independent. We do this on our own. So those paid subscriptions really make all the difference in the world. And Charlie, to the contrary, all your work is great. And I love having these conversations. They're incredibly helpful as we live through these very turbulent political times. So thanks for joining the long view.
Thank you so much.
Talk soon. Bye bye.